Hello, today is March 22nd, 2016. This is Athens Speakout with Dr. Robert Whaley. My name is Steve Antle, and today we're going to kind of talk a little bit about Dr. Whaley. For a few of you here at Ohio University that don't know Mr. Whaley, he's a historian that came here in 1964, and he's from New York. Born, May 16th, 1930?
That's correct.
Long Island, and went to Bates College, attended the University of Pennsylvania, also went to Delaware, went to University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and also attended Oxford in England. So you came here in 64. That was a presidential year. Between Goldwater and Johnson, Barry Goldwater and Lyndon Johnson. And when you arrived here on the campus, I don't know what the atmosphere was here in 64, but I think I was only 8 years old. But you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, from my point of view, Ohio University was a very conservative school. And the Athens Messenger used to print the column of Bill Buckley. Mm-hmm. I thought Bill Buckley was a fool.
Yeah, but he had a good vocabulary. You had to mention.
He had a super vocabulary, and I read Bill Buckley's memoir, which was called God, Yale, and anti-communism. Yeah, he was a big supporter of Joe McCarthy.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, he thought McCarthy was God. And even though McCarthy was denounced, Bill Buckley was still defending Joe McCarthy to the end of his times.
Really? Hunting communist and all
that,
right?
Yeah. And Bill Buckley, of course, was a Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
And his father worked for the Standard Oil Company in Venezuela.
Right.
So he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, and he went to Yale.
Yeah.
Yale, God.
New Haven, Connecticut.
Yeah. That was the title of his essay.
Now, he
wasn't too much.
When did he start the National Review?
Yes, he started the National Review. That came first the book.
Okay.
Then the book gave him the idea of going on television.
But I do remember him on TV.
Sure, right.
Almost laying down in his chair when he.
And then he wrote a column.
People.
He was a columnist, I think. I think the book came first, then the column in a daily newspaper, and.
Well, I think he was still writing that column that appeared in the Athens Messenger when I was in high school in Morgan County.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I dismissed that as nonsense.
Well, I would take it he was a supporter of Barry Goldwater, right?
Oh yes, I think he was a supporter of all Republicans. I don't think he ever voted for a Democrat.
Yeah. He
thought the Democrats were sympathetic to communism.
Right.
The Richard Nixon line.
Right. Yeah.
The liberals are pinks, and the pinks are halfway to a red communist.
Okay. So you supported Lyndon Johnson from Texas, who had been...
No, I didn't. I didn't vote for Lyndon Johnson.
Oh, you didn't?
And I didn't vote for Barry Goldwater. I had first voted in 1960 for Robert Kennedy.
John Kennedy.
John Kennedy, that's correct. John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. And I barely voted for Kennedy because I thought that Kennedy and Nixon were terrible on television.
Yeah.
They were both hawks. The debate was who should pull the trigger. We're going to go to war against China, and we're fighting for the Dodgin Islands.
Yeah.
Now, the Dodgin Islands were minor islands that nobody ever heard of. But the Chiang Kai-shek regime was defeated by Mao Zedong. And Mao Zedong took over China, proclaimed the People's Republic of China, and the remains of the Chiang Kai-shek regime fled to Taiwan.
Okay.
Well, there were a couple little islands off the shore of mainland China because Mao didn't have any sea power. He had a land army.
Right.
So these islands were still protected by the American fleet because Truman immediately put the American fleet to stop Chiang Kai-shek from ever going over to Taiwan. Okay.
Truman did that, you said.
Truman did that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, in
Okay, Robert, if it's going to go all the way back to Truman, in between Truman and Kennedy was Eisenhower. What did he do to maintain things over
all right,
there?
Eisenhower was a liberal Republican who accepted the New Deal. He was
FDR.
he was appointed by Roosevelt to invade Europe and invade North Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And he served under General Marshall, and Eisenhower ran the European theater, and General Douglas MacArthur ran the Far East.
Right.
So MacArthur was a very conservative Republican general who wanted to be the Caesar of Japan.
And at the same time, you had George Patton in the
George
mix.
Patton served in the Third Army in a subordinate role under Eisenhower.
Okay.
And Eisenhower then said, okay, Patton, you're a combat man. You're going to be in the offensive, and you can land in France, and you can go all the way to Berlin with your tanks.
Right.
So that was Patton's idea.
Okay.
I'm going to be the first one in Berlin.
Yeah.
Eisenhower wanted to go slow.
Yeah.
He wanted to save American lives.
Right.
And said, let the Soviets and the Germans kill as many as possible. And Churchill would save the English, and Eisenhower would sell the Americans, and let Stalin fight for Berlin.
Right.
Berlin is not necessary.
Yeah.
So the American army and the Soviet army met in the Elbe River right in the middle of Germany.
Yeah.
And they partitioned Germany into 3 zones, and eventually it became 4.
Right.
But that's a minor footnote to it. And there was a British zone, an American zone, and a German, and a Soviet zone. Mm-hmm. Was that enough on World War II? Or you
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to know, because you went back to Truman and we left out Eisenhower, and we didn't want to do that.
Right. Well,
so you go up to 1960, and Kennedy runs against Eisenhower's vice president, Richard Nixon.
That's correct.
Okay, and you said that they didn't look too good on TV, and you thought they were both hawks.
Right.
You know, they pulled a little trick on Richard Nixon.
Who pulled the trick?
Well, the TV people did. They told him he'd look nice in a wool suit. So he puts on, this is my understanding. He puts on a wool suit, and then they warned John Kennedy, you might want to wear something lightweight.
Yeah.
Because these television cameras are really hot.
Right.
And so Nixon appeared to be sweating.
Right.
And Mr. Kennedy appeared to be pretty cool.
That's right. And Nixon hated the media, and Kennedy loved the media.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And the media was biased in favor of the Democrats.
But the media played...
To this day, as far as that goes...
The media played Richard Nixon's checkers speech, didn't they?
Well, no, that was an interesting thing. Nixon was elected from Los Angeles in the House of Representatives.
Right.
And then because he was in California,
right,
he got immediately elected to the Senate, as an anti-communist, People's Republic of China,
right.
And the Democrats lost the House of Representatives in 1946. And the Republicans won both houses of Congress.
Okay. Now, when did Kennedy come into the Senate?
Kennedy came in 1952, a young man.
So after Nixon had already been there for a little while.
That's correct.
Because it's my understanding, something that I was surprised at when I read Chris Matthews' book, was the fact that Kennedy and Nixon were very close friends.
In the Senate as buddy-buddy in the chair, not politically.
Well, no, I'm saying they had their political differences, but as far as friends were concerned,
sure. This is called comedy. This is called the art of the possible, compromise.
Okay.
That's what senators are supposed to do.
Oh, okay.
I scratch your back, you scratch mine.
Okay.
I'll give you the tobacco subsidy for Kentucky, but then you give me the dairy subsidy for Wisconsin.
That's the way that goes.
That's bargaining. That's called log rolling.
Yeah.
Politics as usual.
That's called collusion, I think is what
well,
it's called.
It's corrupt.
Yeah.
But the average American who believes in democracy.
All right, let's get beyond.
Okay,
we want to get on up to 1964, and of course, unfortunately, John Kennedy had been assassinated. I think it was November 22nd, 1963.
That's good memory.
So Lyndon Johnson took over as president, and
Right.
then when the time came around in '64, he ran against Barry Goldwater of Arizona.
Right.
So I'm going to let you take it from there.
Now, wait a minute. Lyndon Johnson ran against Barry Goldwater.
That's what I just said.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah.
I thought you said Richard Nixon. Okay, fine.
If I did, I misspoke. It
Okay,
was
all right,
Barry,
okay. All right,
Barry
we'll get the
Goldwater
facts straight.
and Lyndon Johnson.
Okay.
Yeah. I've been known to misspeak, and
All right, okay.
so have you.
So I disliked Lyndon Johnson as a crook, even though I was registered as a Democrat,
Right.
because Lyndon Johnson passed a phony resolution called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And he said, well, we're not going to have any wider war. Goldwater is crazy. He wants to use the atomic bomb.
Yeah.
You vote for me, and everything will be okay. And the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution was voted by the Senate, and it said that it gives...
By a misled Senate.
Yeah, but misled Senate. Johnson said, well, in order to defeat Goldwater, we'll pass a resolution giving the president emergency authority to take all action necessary in Southeast Asia, and you don't need a declaration of war. Well, that sounded good to Fulbright, who was a Democrat in charge of the...
From Arkansas.
Yeah, and he thought that Johnson would win the election and Goldwater would be defeated, and this resolution wouldn't amount to anything.
Right.
That's where Goldwater... Goldwater had nothing to do with it, but Johnson fooled Fulbright.
Yeah.
And when Johnson got into office,
And you liked Fulbright.
the Fulbright was an intelligent senator. He was in
Right.
charge of the Foreign Relations
Right,
Committee.
right.
And he was an educator. He had been the president
Right.
of the University of Arkansas.
Well, did you go to Oxford on a Fulbright scholarship?
I had
Yeah.
a scholarship to Spain with a Fulbright.
Okay.
Oxford was something else.
Okay.
That was a
All
GI Bill.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's a good thing.
So, but I was in favor of Fulbright. I
Right.
thought he was very smart. Now, there were two senators who voted no on the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. Wayne Morse of Oregon and his friend from Alaska by the name of Greening. And it was 86-2,
Yeah.
okay? And Fulbright figured, well, Goldwater will be out of it, Johnson will win, and we won't hear any more about that. But in 1965, after Johnson becomes president,
Yeah.
he starts bombing Dominican Republic. He starts to intervene in Dominican Republic in order to install his partner, or his
okay.
puppet.
Yeah.
He wanted the island of Santo Domingo to be an American satellite.
Yeah.
Well, Fulbright said, I've been betrayed.
Yeah.
This guy's an imperialist.
Right.
And he said, I was stupid in voting for the Gulf of Tonkin resolution.
Yeah.
So Goldwater, Fulbright says, let's have hearings on what's going on in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
So then lots of people became doves. Senator Mansfield, Fulbright, and they began to side with Wayne Morse and say, well, we ought to repeal that resolution. Well, that debate went on throughout the Johnson administration and went out all through the Nixon administration.
Yeah.
Can we revoke the Gulf of Tonkin resolution?
Yeah.
So then the Senate was divided between doves and hawks.
Yeah.
The hawks wanted to continue the war all the way to 1972, and McGovern and Eugene McCarthy and Mansfield were all telling Lyndon Johnson, you're going to lose the war, you can't win. And then Nixon came in there, and Henry Kissinger understands the balance of power.
Right.
And he says, Dick Nixon, we're going to pull the fast one. we're going to get out of Indochina. We're going to betray the Saigon government, even though it is a puppet government. And I'm going to make a secret deal with the North, but you'll be elected president.
Yeah.
And that's what Kissinger and Nixon did. They were two partners.
Yeah.
Strange partners.
Yeah.
Kissinger was Jewish, born in Germany.
Right.
Nixon had a little bit of anti-Semitism. They're called the odd couple. Well, they pulled it off.
Yeah, well, good for them.
Anyway, Nixon won the election, but they lost Indochina.
Yeah.
And the American public, to this day, do not understand the balance of power.
Yeah.
That's my thesis as a historian. You got to understand the balance of power in order to win in diplomacy.
In 50 words or less, can you describe the balance of power?
Yeah.
Go right ahead then.
Well, George Washington understood it. The first 6 presidents understood it. And John Quincy Adams understood it, and he was the best Secretary of State of the United States. And in those years, the balance of power was between England, France, and Spain.
Okay.
And if the 13 colonies are going to be independent, they can't be on the side of only England or only France. They have to be able to switch sides in order to protect the interests of the United States.
I see.
So the Jeffersonians were pro-French and wanted to go to war against England. The Massachusetts delegation were pro-British and wanted to go to war on the side of England against France.
Yeah.
And that was all during the Napoleonic Wars.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, anyway, that was a debate between the second president, John Adams, the father of John Quincy,
Right.
and Thomas Jefferson. And then Madison replaced Jefferson, and he was pro-French.
Yeah.
But Jefferson, before he got out, in order to keep out of war, passed an embargo and said, we're going to stop trade with both England and France in order to preserve the peace.
Okay.
So Jefferson was a little bit unpopular when he retired in 1808. And Madison came in there. Now Madison had a lot of hawks in the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
They mostly came from Ohio. They were in the militia: Ohio, Tennessee, Vermont, and Kentucky.
Yeah.
These said, well, we have a militia. We can conquer Canada. So let's have a war against Britain. It was called the War of 1812.
Yeah.
Well, the northern New England states, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, went down to New Jersey, Delaware, and Maryland, went down about as far as Maryland, voted no. And because they said, we don't have enough sea power to win. The British are still #1 in sea power.
Yeah.
Well, the Hawks win, and Madison declares war on England, called the War of 1812.
Yeah.
3 months after he declared war,
Don't touch
yeah,
me.
3 months after he declared war, he said, I made a mistake. This militia, these are amateurs. They can't conquer Canada. The British Army will defeat them.
Who was in charge of Canada at that time?
The British.
The British Empire. That was part of the British Empire. but
Ontario, Quebec,
all
of
those
those
provinces yeah.
were owned by the British and protected by the British Navy.
But what I'm saying, so they called the shots from England.
They called the shots by sea power.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is...
And they lost the war militarily. The British Navy invaded Washington, burned the White House down, and Madison had to flee. Dolly Madison took the picture of George Washington, and she became a hero in the United States. Well, the War of 1812 is compromised by a Federalist.
How long did it last?
It lasted 2 years.
2 years.
From 1812 to 1814. Okay?
Yeah.
And shrewdly, Madison appoints John Quincy Adams as his diplomat to negotiate a peace in Belgium called the Treaty of Ghent.
Yeah. I'm going to have to cough.
That's the balance of
Excuse
power.
me. Yeah. Now, okay, you said the first 5 presidents seemed to understand the balance of power.
Right.
Has there been a...
First 6 presidents.
6, okay. Has there been a president since that time that has understood the balance of power?
Franklin D. Roosevelt.
That's the only one?
Well,
What about Eisenhower? Did he...
Well, he followed Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Now, Eisenhower understood the European balance of power,
Yeah.
but Eisenhower did not understand the balance of power in the Far East. We had no China experts. Okay. Now, Mansfield became a China expert.
Yeah.
Fulbright was a European expert. Okay. Now, John Foster Dulles was the Secretary of State for Eisenhower,
Yeah.
and he thought of himself as an expert on the Far East. So when Acheson became the Secretary of State for Truman, and Truman Bailey won in 1948, they put the Far East desk in charge of John Foster Dulles. And Acheson would take care of Europe. So Acheson negotiated NATO, and that was a success.
Yeah.
But John Foster Dulles was playing hanky-panky with MacArthur.
What do you mean?
They had a secret understanding.
Oh, okay.
We're going to support Chiang Kai-shek. We're going to support South Korea, and we're going to be in charge of the whole Far East.
Well, is the president aware of this at the time?
Truman didn't know much about foreign policy.
Okay.
It was Acheson who delegated the authority.
Okay.
So Acheson said, "Okay, I'm busy in Europe.
Yeah.
Dulles, you can handle the Far East."
Yeah.
But Dulles then kind of fooled Acheson about protecting South Korea.
Yeah.
Acheson made a peculiar speech.
Yeah.
He said, "Here is our defensive perimeter. We're going to protect Alaska. We're going to protect Japan. We're going to protect the Philippine Islands. We're going to protect the island of Taiwan
Okay.
from any communist expansion."
Yeah.
He didn't say anything about Korea. It was just left off.
Yeah.
Just silent. So in June of 1950, suddenly the North Korean army invades the South.
Yeah.
Truman doesn't know anything. Acheson calls him on the phone. He said, "Well, we have to bring the UN in order to save South Korea. So ask for volunteers for the UN, and we don't need a declaration of war.
Yeah.
And the UN, under General MacArthur, will defeat the North Koreans very quickly." Well, the Korean War lasted for 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was a stalemate.
Yeah.
It was finally settled in 1953 by Eisenhower.
And you were in the military at that time, right?
No, I was. I had to register for the draft in 1948.
Yeah.
Okay. And I had to take my physical in 1951.
Yeah.
So I was on the draft register, but I had a student deferment. I had what was called
okay. So you didn't actually.
I didn't have to go, right?
Well, I know you didn't go to Korea, but I thought maybe you play. Where a lot of times when we're at war, that you're in other countries, allied countries.
You have a priority. 1A means you're first to be drafted.
Okay.
This is cannon fodder.
Yeah.
If you just got out of high school and you don't have a college diploma,
right,
you're going to be first to be drafted.
So, okay. You don't need to really explain that. But the thing is, so continue on with the Korean War.
Okay, the Korean War was settled behind the scenes. It was not settled by a peace treaty. It was a ceasefire.
Yeah.
And what Eisenhower did was to put a series of tanks and artillery along the 38th parallel, a place called the DMZ.
Yeah.
And they finally convinced Kim Il-sung that he couldn't get across that line. Now, Stalin was the first one out.
Yeah.
Stalin had to supply MiGs to the Chinese.
Yeah.
And Stalin in 1951 said to Mao, hey, the American Air Force is knocking these MiGs out of the air.
Yeah.
We can't keep supplying MiGs. If you want to fight that war, you do it with your own land troops.
Yeah. There you go.
So essentially, Stalin was saying, let's have a ceasefire.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, Mao thought he could win it. Well, after they kill about 1 million Chinese, Mao was convinced he can no longer do it. So then eventually Mao says to Kim Il-sung, we want a ceasefire. Well, they finally got a ceasefire in July of 1953. That is, make a DMZ and just put in 2 barbed wire fences with 10 miles in between, no man's land.
Yeah.
And they keep that fence going.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And-
we still occupy
Yeah,
that area.
and the North Koreans still think that they can knock that fence down.
Yeah.
And the South Koreans, no, they can't.
Yeah.
So that's
good.
all bluff.
Yeah.
Anyway, the Korean War ended in a stalemate.
Okay.
No, Mao didn't win, Chiang didn't win, Stalin didn't win, and of course Dean Acheson didn't win.
Right.
They got out of the war, status quo antebellum.
Right. Let's go a little bit forward. Let's get up to the end of the Vietnam War.
The end of the Vietnam War.
Well, the middle, the end, whatever. You know, we've already been up there as far as Richard Nixon and
Well, the Vietnam.
Henry Kissinger was concerned.
Well, wait a minute. I think we lost a little chronology here. We said that I came
Keep
to
going back.
Yeah, I came to Athens in
1964
in the
you did.
Goldwater
Johnson.
Johnson era.
Right.
Now, the Vietnam War had already.
And you came here to teach history, right?
I came here to teach history.
And what did you teach?
I taught diplomatic history,
Diplomatic history.
but it was
Because you'd always wanted to be a diplomat, right?
well, I thought at one time I'd be a
Yeah.
diplomat.
Yeah.
But when I got in the American Army and I saw how the bureaucracy worked,
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm going to get a PhD and teach history.
Okay.
I'll be a theorist,
Okay.
which I became.
Yeah.
And I wrote a book on diplomatic history.
Okay.
It was on the balance of power in the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah.
Now, the Spanish Civil War,
And you wrote that book what year?
the book came out in 89,
In 89.
but I got the PhD dissertation in 1962.
Yeah. But you wrote the book and Kentucky Press
Published it,
published it. Okay.
right?
Got it.
And I could see the connection between Benito Mussolini, who got involved in bringing General Franco to power,
Right.
and Lyndon Johnson.
Yeah.
Johnson was playing Mussolini's game.
Yeah.
I'm going to intervene in a civil war in Indochina in order to redesign that civil war in favor of America's interest.
Right.
Well, that's imperialism.
Yeah.
You can't win in somebody's civil war. There are 44 million Vietnamese.
Right.
Well, eventually Johnson and Nixon had to put American GIs in there. And Johnson kept saying, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Well, there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, you know, when I first traveled to Texas, you know, and I'd always heard this and read these things, and of course I had some people from the military kind of inform me about it, but Johnson made a lot of his friends extremely wealthy they became defense contractors.
Yeah,
and
sure.
all over Texas is all types of military hardware being
Sure.
made and
That's right.
everything to this day, you know.
Okay.
So anyway, so you know, as far as him ever being a dove, I don't believe he ever was. You know,
Who, Johnson?
Johnson, yeah,
I don't think Johnson wanted to fight the Vietnam War.
No.
But he was pressured into doing it.
but
Because
at the same time, do you think maybe that he saw an opportunity to? I'm sure if he set these people up as defense contractors, maybe there was some.
now, that's another thing, money.
Yeah,
Johnson inherited that war from Kennedy.
yeah,
And Kennedy inherited from Acheson.
Mm-hmm.
Acheson was the real origin of it.
Yeah.
Because Atchison secretly gave money to the French Empire to hang on to French Indochina.
Well, didn't the French send forward observers into that area long
Well, the French had
before?
an army. The French had an army. They had the Foreign Legion. They were going to defeat Ho Chi Minh
Yeah.
with American money.
Oh, okay.
Well, when the French got out in 1954, when the Korean War ended, the French said, well, okay, Korea's over. We're going to get out of Indochina. And
Yeah.
they did.
Yeah, the producer just reminded me we're at the halfway point here. You're watching ACTV Channel 9 in Athens, Ohio. My name is Steve Antle. This is Dr. Robert Whaley, a historian. And today we are discussing, well, I guess we started out with 1964, and we've gone backwards all the way back to George Washington, and
Not
then
quite.
forward. Well, then we've gone forward to Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon. So, anywhere you want to pick up?
Well, I think I was up to 54.
Okay.
And how the Eisenhower administration started to create a satellite in Saigon after the French got out.
Okay.
The French got out of Indochina, and they divided it into 4 states.
Did the French get out due to the fact that we wouldn't supply them with money?
No, we were
What-
supplying the money forever.
But
But
we
the,
just,
the French taxpayer said, hey, this is a fraud.
yeah, yeah,
The French taxpayer voted a dove into power by the name
Okay.
of Mendes France.
Okay.
He was a socialist.
okay,
And Mendes France said, okay, we'll go to Ho Chi Minh, and we say to Ho Chi Minh, you can have half of Vietnam right now. We'll divide it at the 17th parallel, just like they divided Korea at the 38th parallel. And you are sovereign north of that line.
yeah,
And then we're going to take 2 years to pack up the French army and bring them back home. And then we'll give these mercenaries that we trained to Eisenhower. And they said to Eisenhower, if you want these mercenaries and you want to keep fighting south of that line, that's up to you.
yeah.
So Eisenhower ties himself to a corpse.
Oh boy.
He says, we're going to recognize the Saigon government as an independent government, because that was a lie. The CIA went to New Jersey, got a monk out of the New Jersey monastery and said, okay, you can be the president of South Vietnam.
Right.
No Dinh. Well, all the historians who knew anything about it said, well, this is a fraud.
Right.
Johnson can't win that war.
Right.
Let's get out.
Right.
But Johnson couldn't say that. He couldn't get on the radio and say, hey, the Vietnam War was a loser.
Oh, I see. I see. I get your point now. Yeah.
When the war was all over,
Well, a lot of people don't want to
they don't want to
admit
retreat.
defeat.
Yeah, they don't want to admit defeat.
Yeah.
Someone asked Johnson when it was all over, well, why did you fight so long? And he said, well, the reason why I fought is that I didn't want to wake up in the morning and read in the Washington Post, Johnson has just lost Indochina.
Wow.
Because Nixon had said the Democrats lost mainland China. So he was fighting for a TV image. And of course he was fighting for oil.
In the meantime,
and he was fighting for the military-industrial
Right,
complex.
right. In
That was beneath the thing.
In the meantime, we lost 58,000
Thousand men.
Americans.
Right.
Yep.
So that was a war without a cause, without a name.
Yeah.
They didn't have a strategy.
Right. It was a police action.
A so-called police action.
Right. I don't agree with that either. But anyway, so where do you want to take off from there, Robert?
Well, all right. So we made the connection between Vietnam and Korea and the anti-communist crusade of both the Democrats and the Republicans, and that continues through the Nixon administration.
Yeah.
Now, Nixon plays the balance of power game, and he says ideology is not important. What's important are the nation states. What's important is Chinese nation, the Russian nation, and you can play the balance of power if you recognize Beijing as the rightful heir to the UN to the Security Council seat. But you're going to have to admit that this boycott of China is absurd. China is not a puppet of the Soviet Union.
Right.
They are two nation states.
Right.
And as long as you stay in Indochina, you are solidly behind that false ideology of anti-communism.
Yeah.
The communists of Korea, the communists in Tito, in Yugoslavia, they are nations. All communists are not the same nationality.
Right.
Nixon finally gets it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the American public didn't get it.
I guess not.
That's the balance of power, is put national interest ahead of ideology.
There you go.
National interest against...
Sounds pretty simple when you explain it.
That's right.
Yeah, evidently, it doesn't register with those people that...
Because they don't read any history.
Yeah.
Well, look at these presidents in the United States running now. How much history does Trump, Cruz, Hillary Clinton, who's the other candidate? Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. How much history have they read? Bernie Sanders understands more history than the other three candidates.
Mm-hmm. Now, Cruz understands the Constitution, or so he
says he does.
He does, yeah.
He does have a degree from Harvard. He does have a law school degree. Mm-hmm. But what clauses in the Constitution does he want to ignore, and which ones does he want to enforce?
Yeah, that's not been established yet.
Yeah,
Robert.
well, you see, the key clause, which I'm concerned about, is the War Powers Clause.
Right.
The Constitution says Congress shall declare war. Mm-hmm. Now, the president has the authority to have some police action. How long does that last? Right. When does a police action become a war?
Right.
Well, the original founders thought maybe a 3-month campaign in Tripoli or a 6-week campaign and would be a police action.
Yeah.
Or fighting the Indians. You could fight the Apaches without a declaration of war.
Yeah.
But if you want to fight a big power like England, you got to get a declaration of war.
Yeah.
Now, when Roosevelt went to war, he got a declaration of war against Japan, Italy, and Germany, and the Congress voted 99% for it. He had one dissenter. There was one person who voted against that war against Japan. Mm-hmm. Her name was Jeanette Rankin from Montana. She was a pacifist.
Yeah.
And she voted against Woodrow Wilson's war in 1917.
Yeah.
She had the privilege of voting against 2 wars, and then immediately had to resign and became during the Vietnam War, a lot of women got together and founded the Jeanette Rankin Brigade.
That's what I've heard.
Protesting war.
I've heard that name.
So she's a hero of the feminists.
Yeah.
Because the women don't want to fight wars.
No.
They want to be protected by an army that wins. Okay, well, I guess that's pretty good.
Okay.
I'm satisfied. You ask the next question.
So let's just say we got the Vietnam War over with. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Got it out.
So, and that supposedly ended in 1975.
No, 72.
Well, yeah, but I mean, then there was, we weren't out there till 75.
All right, well, Nixon, let's get the chronology. Nixon won the election in 72.
All right.
And then right after that, you have the Watergate investigation.
Right.
And it pointed, the Dubs, the Democrats pointed out, well, Nixon was carrying off a number of crimes in order to keep that war going. Mm-hmm. And his attorney general and Liddy and all kinds of people were pulling dirty tricks in order to defeat...
G. Gordon Liddy.
In order to defeat McGovern.
Yeah.
And McGovern looked like a fool.
But Watergate break-in.
Yeah, but Watergate was a plot on the part of the CIA and the FBI to destroy the credibility of McGovern.
Yeah.
And McGovern then lost the election big. He took one state, Massachusetts, his own state.
Yeah.
But he lost 49 states.
Yeah.
But as soon as that's over, in 73, Kissinger goes to Hanoi and negotiates a secret treaty in Paris. And they say, okay, let's sell out Saigon. We'll recognize the Hanoi government. We'll recognize, and you can fight South Vietnam on your own.
Yeah.
And since you're better armed, you'll probably win. But he's saying to the South, he's saying to Ngo Dinh Diem and all of his generals, well, we keep bombing the North. You can probably defeat the North. Well, that lasted for about 6 months to 2 years. And eventually, the Congress says, hey, why do we keep supplying money to the Saigon regime? We brought the boys home.
Yeah.
There are no American troops there.
Wasn't there a boat lift, though, in 1975?
Yeah, 1975.
Yeah.
There were only 20,000 American troops left in 72 when Nixon won.
Yeah.
But then in 73, they gradually withdraw those.
Yeah.
And then supposedly, the South Vietnamese army is going to hold the line on the Ho Chi Minh Trail and the 17th parallel.
So, wow.
Well, that was what Ford inherited.
Yeah.
Ford wasn't
Gerald
guilty.
Ford.
Yeah, he just was inherited with the defeat. Nobody blames Ford.
So we can just kind of, why don't we just go from Gerald Ford? He pardoned Nixon, and then then he ran against Jimmy Carter in 1976.
And he believed in the balance of power, but he didn't know how to operate it.
Jimmy Carter, you're talking about?
Yeah, he liked Kissinger. He said, yes, we believe in détente. We believe in peaceful coexistence. Amnesty, the war's over. And I'm going to settle the peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis.
Yeah.
Now, this is where Jimmy Carter has great ideals, great hopes, but he can't pull it off because he's not skilled as a negotiator. He doesn't have any experience as a diplomat. See, Kissinger went to Harvard, knew everybody in MIT, knew where all of the experts are in China, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. Carter didn't have any of that background.
Yeah.
He had a degree from Annapolis. He knew something about atomic diplomacy.
Yeah.
Okay. So when he got in there, he said, well, I know a lot about the Bible. I think I can negotiate a peace based on Christianity between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And you have to make concessions to the Palestinians. Well, Zionism is not the biblical Israelite government of the Old Testament. The state of Israel wants to get money from the United States to have the largest army and most effective army in the Middle East. That's still the issue today.
So was he dealing with Menachem Begin at the time?
Menachem Begin, no, he came in later.
Later. There was that guy before him.
I think it was Moshe Dayan is the important one.
Well,
Moshe Dayan won the Third War.
Yeah.
In the 1967 war.
67 war. Yeah.
And he doubled the size of Israel. He took the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, the Golan Heights from Syria, and he conquered all of Palestine and made the Palestinians a kind of an open-air concentration camp.
Yeah.
And he wasn't going to recognize any Palestinian state.
Yeah.
Well, Kissinger said, that's not the balance of power. You can't hang on to the Sinai Peninsula. You can't keep the Suez Canal closed. So Kissinger put pressure on Israel. You withdraw from the Sinai Peninsula. And he made a deal between Egypt and Israel.
Yeah.
He said, Egypt, if you recognize the independence of Israel and separate yourself from Iraq and Syria and Jordan and the other Arab states.
Who was the Egyptian leader at that time?
Anwar Sadat.
Yeah, Sadat.
Anwar Sadat.
And he was later assassinated.
He was later, and he said, you can get, because you want to separate the Arab front
Yeah.
and make Egypt an independent state.
Yeah.
So from the point of view of Iraq, Egypt sold out the Middle East by making a separate deal with Israel and the United States. And they recognize the Israeli Prime Minister recognizes Egypt, and Egypt recognizes Jerusalem, and he goes to Jerusalem and gives a speech to the Knesset.
Yeah.
And supposedly there's a peace, but there's not a. It's a cold peace.
Yeah.
Because the Egyptians have a tunnel, and there are lots of Palestinians that get supplies and so forth and so on. So Israel and the Arab world is still at loggerheads.
Right.
And as long as they get weapons, they're not going to ever retreat.
Yeah.
And that's where Hillary is. Hillary will give Israel whatever it wants.
Well, there was
$3 billion a year.
when she was a New York senator. There were a lot of Jewish people that voted for her. So
Yeah, right.
she's, you know.
As long as you give Israel its money,
Right.
we don't have any problem.
Yeah.
But the United States is running out of money.
Yeah.
And Obama says to Netanyahu, well, you've got to make some kind of a compromise with Palestine. Let's have two states.
Mm-hmm. Two-state solution.
Yeah, well, that's not going to be signed as long as Netanyahu is in office.
Right.
So we got to wait for the retirement of Netanyahu.
Yeah.
So there have been 5 official Arab-Israeli wars, and then there are a couple of little police actions. The Lebanese war lasted for 6 weeks, and there's been a little Palestinian war. Mm-hmm. They keep killing casualties.
Yeah.
So the Middle East is still in loggerheads.
So is there anything else you want to say about the Jimmy
Carter
administration?
Did I bring in this little thing? About,
yeah, you got this here.
I want to tell you why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
He's Jewish.
Yeah, well, let me hold it up here so people can see it. See there. Don't have a producer back there to zoom in on the camera, but if you pick up a copy of the November copy, well, this is a 2013 of the Progressive, you'll see Bernie Sanders.
Right.
And it's in an interview with John Nichols.
He's from The Nation magazine.
And yeah.
And Nichols supports, and The Nation magazine supports Sanders. The New York Times supports Hillary. Mm-hmm. And that's the debate now. My wife supports Hillary.
Yeah.
I support Sanders because Sanders is for peace first. Now, Sanders' strategy is we can send a few advisors to Iraq and Syria, and we can cooperate with the Russians, and we can cooperate with Iran, and we'll get Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Iran to put in the ground troops and resolve this terrorist war. It's their problem. Mm-hmm. They have to take care of their terrorists, not American troops on the ground, no boots on the ground. We can give them a couple of CIA Special Forces advice, but it's the Middle East problem to solve the Middle East, and hopefully Egypt and Turkey and Iran and these 4 powers can eventually stop terrorism.
Right.
Terrorism is a threat. Mm-hmm. But you got to define terrorism.
Right.
And he says we're going to have a very narrow definition of terrorism.
Now, well, you want to give his definition or your definition?
My definition is the United States needs a law which defines terrorism as a murder with bombs or guns against a group of poor people called terrorists. But the British have to take care of Irish terrorism. The Germans have to take care of Polish terrorism, or Soviet terrorism, or Russian terrorism. And the United States cannot defeat 1.7 billion Muslims. You can make a deal with the Saudi government, you can make a deal with the Turkish government to be an ally of the United States in order to defeat Hamas or Hezbollah. These are or the PLO.
Right.
These are various terrorist organizations. But fighting terrorism with bullets is like hitting a hornet's nest with a stick.
You mentioned
You can't fight
these terrorist groups who have, been
There are
around for a
dozens of
while,
them.
but I think a lot of people are concerned about the ones called ISIS or Al Qaeda, those type of
All right,
terrorists.
well,
right now, and of course, what we had in Brussels
Obama
today,
killed
so-
Al Qaeda's head guy, Osama bin Laden. What?
Yeah.
There are 3 or 4 more
Oh, yeah.
terrorist organizations.
Right. Yeah.
It's like the hornet's nest.
Yeah.
You kill one terrorist and his daughters and sons become terrorists.
Right.
Keep recruiting to the next. Now you got another kind of an organization in Nigeria. You got some in Indonesia. You got different ones in Philippines.
Right.
And there are even some crazy Europeans who volunteer because they don't like the United States and Britain.
Right. Right.
Who volunteer to fight for ISIS.
So you think Bernie Sanders has the best idea as to
It's a
what
go-slow
to do?
policy. It's going to
Yeah.
take a long time. But you can't fight it with ground troops.
Yeah, that's
You,
true.
you can fight it with diplomacy.
Yeah.
Now, this strategy is outlined by my favorite historian by the name of Andrew Bacevich,
Okay.
who lost his son in the Iraq War,
Yeah.
and he voted against Bush 43's war and resigned from the American Army and got a PhD.
Yeah.
But he kept his lieutenant colonel's rank and began to teach part-time. He got a PhD from Princeton,
Yeah.
and he has a go-slow strategy. And his strategy is get the Middle East 4 great powers fight terrorism with a certain American advice. You can send a couple of drones over, but you can't have boots on the ground and defeat Pakistan. You can't defeat Iran. You can't defeat. You
Because
can't.
this is a global problem.
That's
you
a
know.
global. The global war against terrorism is an absurdity.
Yeah.
You can define terrorism in the United States. The United States has to take care of would-be terrorists that come here and go to San Bernardino.
Right.
That's the American duty, is
Yeah.
to protect the United States shores. But you can't police the entire Middle
No.
East. You don't have enough troops. So just to send a few advices and have the Egyptians do the heavy lifting, have the Saudis provide the money, and a couple of those Gulf states, which are
Yeah.
very rich.
Yeah.
So it'll be oil money that'll keep the pot boiling. And you got to negotiate a nuclear deal with Iran.
Yeah.
And of course, the crazy people like Trump and Cruz want to tear up that agreement and start to fight some kind of a war with Iran. I don't believe Trump. I don't believe Cruz. I think they've got rocks in their head. So vote for Bernie. So I can't say that.
You
because
can't say that.
We already had the vote. We already had the vote. It's
Yeah,
over.
It's over. But, yeah. So I guess we got about 2 minutes left in the program. Is that right, Matt?
Yep.
Well, do you want to sum up what we had to talk about today, and perhaps
I'm just saying that as a historian, as a diplomatic historian,
right.
you have to understand,
And as a dove,
well, a dove is a tactic. I was not a dove on World War II. I was a dove on Indochina
nice K.
because I discovered,
But did you consider yourself a hawk at World War II, or
yeah,
okay,
I was a patriot.
okay,
I wanted Spitfires to shoot down the Nazi ME-109s.
Okay.
I wanted John Wayne to get in the P-40 and shoot down zeros. And when Pearl Harbor broke out, I said, yeah, you got to slap the dirty little Jap. I was anti-Japanese. And I used to capture Japanese beetles and put them in a can. I'm killing the Japanese beetles.
Oh, okay.
Well, it's a teenage view of the war.
Yeah.
In other words,
But as things changed, you know, you may have seen the light, I guess you would say.
Well, I read in the Chicago Tribune in 47. I used to go down to Times Square and I would buy newspapers from the 48 states.
Yeah.
So I got the Chicago Tribune.
Right.
And they had a beautiful cartoon in there. The enemy in 1941, Japan.
Yeah.
The friend, China. 1946, the friend, Japan. The enemy, China.
Here we go. It
You
changes.
switch the balance of power.
Right. Well, we've got to
Colonel
wrap.
McCormick understood the balance of power from the point of view
We've got to
of
wrap it up
Chicago.
here, Robert. It's been interesting talking with you, and you say that debate is the.
Oxygen of democracy.
That's right.
Thank you for coming.
All right. We'll see you next week.